China has the longer range missile. China has the more powerful radar, 6 jets to 10, and a surveillance aircraft watching the whole engagement from 200 kilometers back. On paper, when Chinese fighters intercept an American formation over the Yellow Sea, China wins before it starts. That's not a political take. That's hardware math. The J-16 carries a missile that outranges anything the F-16 has on its wing. The radar in its nose detects threats at distances the American pilots can't answer from. Every metric that matters in a beyond visual range fight goes Beijing's way. So here's the question. If China scrambles its best fighters against a 10-ship American formation in international airspace, and everything goes exactly as Beijing trained for, why do Chinese pilots end up with 2 F-16s sitting undetected in their 6 o'clock clean-shot geometry before anyone on the Chinese side even realizes what happened? It's not about having a better jet. It's not about the missile. It's about something that never shows up on a capability comparison. And once you understand it, the numbers stop looking the way they do right now. To understand why this goes wrong for China, you first have to understand why it shouldn't. The Shenyang J-16 is the most capable fighter the PLA Air Force currently operates. Russian flanker airframe, big, twin-engine, built for range, rebuilt from the nose back with Chinese electronics. The radar it carries is an AESA set, active electronically scanned array, no moving parts. 1,000 antenna elements shifting the beam electronically, jumping between contacts faster than any mechanical radar can track. Detection range past 250 kilometers, and it shares that picture in real time with every other cockpit in the formation. Under its wings, PL-15S, China's longest-reaching air-to-air missile. Dual-pulse rocket motor, fires at launch, then fires again in the terminal phase like a drag racer hitting the nitrous right before the finish line. Burnout velocity past Mach 4. The seeker goes independent inside the final 30 kilometers, meaning the missile stops needing its launch jet once it's close enough to find the target itself. Range past 200 kilometers. Nothing the F-16 carries comes close. Behind all of this, orbiting 200 kilometers from the engagement at 30,000 feet, is a KJ-500 airborne early warning aircraft. Think of it as a flying security camera above the entire battlefield, a surveillance radar painting every contact in the sky and feeding that picture by data link to every Chinese pilot in the air. Against this, the Americans are flying F-16C Block 70s, single engine, smaller. The APG-83 radar in the F-16's narrower nose uses the same electronically scanned technology as the J-16 set, but in a compressed package with shorter detection range. The AMRAAM on the rail runs out past 160 kilometers under good conditions. Against the PL-15, the Americans are fighting uphill on every range number that matters. Put those two packages side by side and China wins. That's what Beijing's training is built on. See first, lock first, shoot first, but the engagement doesn't start on paper. 12 minutes after the J-16S roll off the flight line, the lead Chinese pilot has the lead American aircraft, callsign Viper 1, locked at 140 kilometers. Missile quality track, meaning a lock clean enough to actually fire on. Closure rate above 900 knots. Fire control solution lit. Viper 1 doesn't react. The lock holds for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Most pilots break at 10. Even disciplined pilots start asking questions at 20. At 30, the formation commander is supposed to be on the radio. Viper 1 holds altitude, holds heading, holds silent, like the lock is background noise. Here's what Viper 1 knows that the J-16 pilot doesn't. The F-16 carries an electronic warfare suite below the cockpit. Not a radar, not a jammer, a receiver, passive, silent, invisible to anything the J-16 is scanning for. From the moment the Chinese formation first swept the American jets, that suite has been logging every pulse of the J-16's fire control radar, frequency, update rate. The exact moment the tracking mode shifted from search to lock, every change in the radar's behavior feeds directly into Viper 1's cockpit display in real time. The J-16's radar, designed to hunt American aircraft, has been broadcasting its every move to those aircraft since the first sweep. This isn't a flaw the Chinese engineers missed, it's physics. Every radar transmits, every transmission can be received. The Americans built an aircraft that listens, and the J-16 is a very loud talker. But the EW problem is only the first thing that goes wrong. The second is geometry. At 90 kilometers, the J-16 lead scope shows something that wasn't there at 140. The American formation isn't stacked tight. 4 contacts at 34,000 feet. 4 more at 28,000. 2 more barely visible at 22,000 feet, low against the sea surface return. 12,000 feet of vertical separation across 40 kilometers of lateral spread. 10 aircraft distributed through 3 altitude layers. Here's the problem that creates. The J-16's AESA radar handles horizontal scanning fine. Vertical scanning across a spread this wide is a different calculation. The antenna has to physically tilt to cover the full altitude range, and at 90 kilometers, the tilt resolution is barely good enough to separate contacts 6,000 feet apart vertically. The Americans just doubled that spacing. Think of it this way. Imagine trying to watch 3 floors of a building through a single window. You can see 1 floor clearly. The other 2 require you to physically move. The Americans just put fighters on all 3 floors at once. To hold a missile-quality lock on 1 aircraft, the J-16 lead has to commit his radar beam to 1 altitude block and let the other 2 go soft. To cover the full picture, he has to widen the beam and lose the lock he's held for 2 minutes. He widens, the lock craters. The most advanced fire control radar the PLA Air Force has deployed over international waters just got beaten by altitude spacing. Not a jammer, not stealth, no exotic countermeasure, basic geometry, and no missile has left a rail yet. Those 2 low contacts at 22,000 feet, barely resolved against the wave reflections coming off the sea surface below, just fell completely off the bottom of his scope. That matters in about 3 minutes. When the lock drops, Viper 1 keys the radio once. 1 click, no words. 9 acknowledgements come back in 2 seconds. The Americans reposition. The high group pushes north at just under the speed of sound. Military power, meaning full throttle without afterburner, the equivalent of flooring the car without hitting the nitrous. The middle group holds. The low aircraft hold heading and stay down. The J-16 lead has been 4 minutes into this intercept without a clean solution. His patience is gone. He does what his training built him to do. Nose up, afterburners lit across all 6 jets, climbing hard toward the high group before it extends any further. Standard intercept doctrine. Commit to the nearest threat. Here's the bill. Energy in air combat is exactly like money. Altitude spends it. Descending earns it back. Afterburner is a credit card with a 40% interest rate. And there's a fixed credit limit before the fuel gauge goes amber. The J-16S just maxed the card chasing an aircraft that simply moved away in level flight at a speed they couldn't sustain. The F-16 extending north never lit their own afterburners. They held Mach 0.95 in level flight and watched the J-16S climb through 31,000 feet. Watch the closure rate slow. Watch 2 Chinese wingmen tick past combat fuel reserve. The point where if you turn for home right now, you make the runway. 2 of them were already past it. But the J-16 lead has the high group ahead of him, and he doesn't know yet that Viper 1 is about to make things considerably worse. 2 clicks from Viper 1, no voice call needed. Every pilot in the formation already knows the move. Viper 3 and Viper 4 bank hard south. Viper 1 and Viper 2 brake hard north. 4 aircraft at maximum rate turns in opposite directions. 2 miles of sky between them, pulling 5 Gs. The bracket. The oldest trick in fighter aviation. It works every time because it presents one unsolvable problem. Which pair do you chase? Chase south and the north element flanks you. Chase north and you've given up the south. Pick wrong, and the half you ignored is settling in behind you. Pick right, and you've still conceded half the engagement. There is no version where a single formation wins both halves. The Chinese pilot has roughly a quarter of a second to decide. He picks the closer element, turns right. His wingmen follow. Standard doctrine. The south element goes completely uncontested, and below the engagement, in the one piece of airspace no Chinese radar has been covering since the intercept started, those 2 aircraft are already moving. When the Chinese formation committed to the climb, the 2 low aircraft pushed throttles and pulled the nose up. Zoom climb. Trading airspeed for altitude, the same physics a roller coaster uses at the bottom of the track. No radar emissions, no radio calls, just kinetic energy converting to position in airspace every Chinese sensor in the formation was pointed away from. 7 minutes after the intercept began, those two aircraft, callsign Outlaw, are at 36,000 feet, 30 kilometers behind the J-16 formation, 2,000 feet above it, radar in standby, AMRAAMs in the priority firing slot. The Chinese sixth ship is flying directly away from them. Not one sensor in that formation is covering the airspace Outlaw just occupied. Not the J-16 radars, not the KJ-500 watching from 200 kilometers back. 6 pilots with the most sophisticated airborne radar package China operates, and every single one of them is looking through the windshield in the same direction. In fighter aviation, this is called a Check 6 failure. 6 pilots flying like a row of cars on the same highway with nobody checking the mirror, and the cars behind them aren't there anymore. From here, the math is not complicated. The AMRAAM doesn't need a sustained lock to kill, fire, break away, let the active seeker find the target in the final approach on its own. Time of flight from this range, under 60 seconds. The J-16 formation would have less than 30 seconds to react to a launch warning arriving from a direction their radars aren't covering. The trap was set in the first 30 seconds of the intercept. It closed 8 minutes ago. Nobody on the Chinese side noticed. The lead Chinese pilot finds out the way bad news always arrives in a cockpit, from the one pilot who was doing the thing everyone was supposed to be doing. Number 5 in the formation, running the Check 6 scan he was taught at flight school, banks with the formation as it turns west towards Shandong. For 3 seconds, 2 grey shapes sit above his right shoulder against the yellow sea sky. 2 F-16, holding station, watching the Chinese formation fly home. He calls it on the radio in 2 words. The lead pilot runs the engagement back. 6J-16S, AKJ-500 watching from behind. Every range and sensor advantage the mission brief listed. And 2 F-16S, smaller jet, shorter missile, narrower radar, sitting in the one position that makes all of that irrelevant. Every advantage the formation carried was real. The radar reached further. The missile hit harder at distance. The surveillance coverage was genuinely comprehensive, but none of it translated because the Americans turned every one of those advantages into a geometry problem. And the geometry problem had one answer. Here's the frame worth carrying out of this. Range matters when you can see the target. A missile matters when you have a valid firing solution. Radar reach only means something when the threat is inside the scan volume you're covering. Strip the geometry away from any of those things, put a threat in the airspace nobody's watching, and the hardware becomes a number on a spec sheet that never got tested. The J-16 was designed to win a specific fight, a fight where China sees first, locks first, and fires before the Americans can respond. The Americans showed up knowing exactly what that fight looked like, and flew a completely different one. That's not a one-time result, that's doctrine. Which is why the next time you see a capability comparison, missile range, radar power, numbers on the ramp, the only question worth asking is, who controls the geometry? Because the pilot with the better missile doesn't win the engagement. The pilot who decides where it happens does. If you want to see how this same problem unfolds when China's facing a stealth aircraft that the radar can't find in the first place, that's the next video. The geometry gets harder for Beijing, not easier.